Have you ever wondered what happens when a soul who feels the world more deeply than anyone else, a super empath, finally breaks? Not because they're weak, but because they've carried too many burdens that were never theirs to bear. They're not just empathetic, they're vibrant flames, burning bright in the darkness of humanity, feeling every pulse of joy and pain that others are too afraid to even acknowledge. But even the brightest fire will eventually burn out if it's never refueled. Today we're going on a journey into their soul, from radiant light to shadowy depths and beyond. We're going to explore the 10 powerful signs that a super empath has reached their breaking point. This isn't just a story about collapse, it's about the strength that rises from the ashes of that breaking. Stay with me, because once you understand them, you might just recognize a piece of yourself in their story. Super empaths are rare souls, gifted with the ability to see what most of us overlook. They hear the silent cries behind forced smiles, feel the loneliness in a crowded room, and hold space for emotions others refuse to face. They're not just kind, they are compassion in human form. They're not just patient, they are mountains standing tall against the storms of selfishness and ingratitude. But that very openness, that heart that doesn't know how to say no, becomes a double-edged sword, leaving them vulnerable to those who only take but never give. Think of Alex, a typical super empath in today's world. Alex is the one you call at 2 a.m. when your heart is shattered, the one who gives up an entire day off just to help you get through a crisis. But when Alex eventually crumbles under the weight of their own exhaustion, they come face to face with a bitter truth. Not a single person they had helped ever stopped to ask, "Do you need me?" That's the paradox of the super empath. They're the lighthouse guiding others to shore, but few realize that even lighthouses can dim in the middle of a storm. And when they reach their limit, what happens then? Let's dive into the 10 signs, each one a chapter in their story of survival and rebirth. 1. The cosmic ears shut down. Super empaths possess ears that don't just hear sounds, they hear the spaces between words, the stifled breaths, the echoes of pain you're too afraid to speak out loud. They are safe harbors for every lost ship, the place where you can unload your burdens without fear of judgment or rejection. But imagine carrying that weight day after day, year after year. Every story you share, every complaint you pour out becomes a stone placed on their shoulders, and they carry it with a smile. Not because they're endlessly strong, but because they believe it's their purpose, until one day the final stone drops, and it's too much. Those cosmic ears, once wide open to absorb the sounds of humanity, begin to close. They no longer want to hear another cry for help, not because they've become cold or indifferent, but because, for the first time, they need to hear the voice inside themselves. They put on headphones, walk away from the storm of noise, and quietly declare, "I've done enough." This sudden silence confuses those around them, especially the ones who've grown used to leaning on them. Why aren't they listening anymore? They used to be my best friend. But the real question is, have you ever truly listened to them? Or did you just treat them like a loudspeaker for your own pain? When a super empath shuts down their ears, it's not the end of their compassion, it's the beginning of their self-protection. They're not abandoning you, they're saving themselves from the exhaustion that, unknowingly, you helped create. 2. The mind fortress rises. The mind of a super empath is a marvel. It's like an untiring explorer constantly diving deep into the complex corners of human behavior. They don't just see you, they see the scars you've hidden, the fears you've buried, and the dreams you're too afraid to admit. They don't judge on the surface like most people. They analyze, empathize, and seek meaning in every glance, every gesture. But that depth of understanding comes at a cost. Every time they decode another soul, they drain a part of their own energy. They become unpaid therapists for friends, partners, co-workers, always trying to understand why you act the way you do, why you hurt them, why you can't return the kindness they so freely give. And then one day they reach their limit, and their mind builds a fortress. The doors that were once wide open to receive every emotion now slam shut, locked by exhaustion and emotional wounds. Think of Sarah, a super empath who spent years analyzing her ex, a narcissist who constantly manipulated her. She used to ask herself, what did I do wrong? What does he need in order to change? But one day she stopped. She said, I don't need to understand him anymore. I need to understand myself. That fortress isn't a sign of weakness. It's a symbol of strength. They've chosen to stop decoding the minds of those who don't deserve it. They no longer want to dissect your behavior. They want to free themselves from the mental weight that over-understanding has placed on them. And when the doors of their mind finally close, it's the first step toward reclaiming the peace they've long been denied. 3. Hands of Grace Retreat. Super empaths have hands of grace, open, warm, and always ready to lift others up. They help you through your darkest days, from listening to your tears to gently piecing together the fragments of your life. They don't just give their time, they give their heart. But the world isn't always fair. Some people begin to see those hands as an endless resource, an emotional ATM they can withdraw from without ever giving anything back. They accept the help, the comfort, the sacrifices of the super empath, but rarely pause to ask, what can I do for you? Eventually, when the weight becomes too much, those hands begin to retreat, no longer outstretched to meet endless demands, no longer reaching out to save those who fail to appreciate them. They slip their hands into their pockets and quietly say, I can't be the only one giving any more. Imagine being in a relationship where you're always the caregiver, always the one making sacrifices, while the other person just sits back and receives. How would you feel when you realize you're completely drained and they're still asking for more? That's what the super empath experiences. They don't pull their hands away because they've stopped loving. They do it because they've realized their kindness is not meant to be exploited. They begin asking, who truly deserves my generosity? And when they find the answer, they reserve those hands for those who truly value them, and more importantly, for themselves. 4. Sensitivity fades to grey. Sensitivity is the vibrant flame that burns within the heart of a super empath. They live with an emotional radar constantly on, always aware of how their words and actions impact others. They weigh every word, every touch, because they know even the smallest misstep can wound those they care about. But that flame can't burn forever without air to breathe. When they're met with ingratitude, when they're wounded by the very people they once nurtured, the fire begins to dim. They don't want it to fade, but they're left with no choice. What was once their strength becomes a burden, and they're forced to dull their sensitivity into a muted grey just to protect themselves. Think about those moments when you've had to numb yourself just to get through the day. For a super empath, that isn't just a coping mechanism, it's survival. They once felt everything so deeply, your joy, your sorrow, your anger, but when they reach their limit, a quiet question echoes inside. Who will feel my pain? Who cares about the scars I carry? The fading of sensitivity isn't a failure, it's a quiet triumph. They're not turning cold. They are learning to hold on to parts of themselves they've given away for far too long. And in that shade of grey, they discover a new kind of strength. The strength to say no without guilt. The strength to protect their spirit before it's completely extinguished. 5. The Mirror of Retribution. After hundreds of days spent suffering in silence, the super empath does something that shocks the world. They pick up the mirror and reflect it back to the one who hurt them. They're no longer the passive victim. They become the storyteller, using the abuser's own actions to expose the truth. Imagine a narcissist who manipulated them for years, blaming, demanding, turning the empath into nothing more than a shadow of themselves. The super empath once tried to understand, tried to forgive, but when they reach their breaking point, they respond by mirroring the very coldness, the very selfishness they once endured. They say, if you want me to be your mirror, then look closely. This is who you really are. The abuser can't stand it. They grow angry, panicked, because for the first time they're forced to see themselves clearly, not through the empath's words, but through this powerful act of reflection. But this isn't revenge, it's awakening. The empath doesn't do it to hurt, they do it to force accountability. This is the moment the super empath proves they're not some saint. They're human, with limits, with wounds, and with the right to reclaim justice in their own way. They don't become cruel, they simply stop being the victim, and that is a power no one can ever take from them. 6. The Volcano Awakens. Super empaths are like patient mountains, steady, calm, and unshaken by the cold winds of ingratitude and selfishness. They're the ones you can vent to without fear of backlash, the ones who quietly swallow their own emotions to keep the peace. But beneath that calm exterior lies a simmering fire, waiting for the day it erupts. They don't get angry easily. That's why you often see them smiling even when their heart is bleeding. They endure, not because they're weak, but because they believe their calmness can soothe the chaos around them. But don't be mistaken, their patience is not infinite. It's like a volcano, silent for centuries, but when it awakens, nothing can stop it. When they reach their limit, that fire bursts forth. Think of James, a super empath working in a high-pressure office. He was always the peacemaker, always the one cleaning up others' messes. But one day, when a co-worker falsely accused him in front of the entire team, he stood up and shouted, "I've had enough, you can't keep doing this." That shout wasn't just rage, it was the release of years of suppression, years of being overlooked and undervalued. That eruption isn't about losing control, it's a declaration. They don't explode to destroy, they do it to remind the world that they too have limits, that they are not emotionless machines built to endure endlessly. And when that fire burns, it doesn't just scorch those who push them too far. It illuminates the path for the empath to finally rediscover themselves. 7. The light goes dark. Super empaths are lighthouses in the storm of the modern world. They radiate hope, casting away the darkness for everyone around them, even while battling waves of their own inner turmoil. They're the light you turn to when everything feels heavy, the steady flame that burns through the coldest winter night. But that light isn't eternal. It needs fuel, appreciation, reciprocity, recognition, to keep burning. When they reach their limit, when they realize they've been giving endlessly only to be met with apathy, the flame begins to fade. They don't want it to go out, but they no longer have the strength to keep it alive. Imagine being an oil lamp, burning brightly each night to guide others, yet no one brings more oil. They simply watch, enjoy your glow, and walk away. Eventually the lamp runs dry and darkness takes over. That's what happens to the super empath, that they don't stop shining because they've become selfish. They stop because they've been forgotten for too long. This moment isn't just their loss, it's a wake-up call for all of us. But if you don't cherish their light, if you don't help keep that flame alive, then you'll share responsibility when the darkness returns. They are not an endless energy source. They are human, and like all of us, they need to be nourished to continue shining. 8. The Unfiltered Tongue. The words of a super empath are medicine for the soul. Gentle, hopeful, and carefully chosen to avoid hurting anyone. They use language to build bridges, to heal wounds, to bring light to life's darkest corners. They understand the power of words, that a kind sentence can save a soul, while a careless one can shatter it. But when they reach their limit, that caution disappears. They drop the filters, and their words become sharp blades, cutting through the masks and the lies without hesitation. They used to bite their tongue to protect you, to cushion the truth with kindness, but now they speak what they truly feel, and that honesty might shake you to your core. Think about the last time you said exactly what you felt, without fear. How freeing was that? For the super empath, that moment is a release. They may say, "I am tired of pretending everything's okay. You don't deserve my patience anymore." Those words aren't cruelty. They are raw truth that's been bottled up for far too long, finally unleashed like a storm that can no longer be contained. This isn't a sign of bitterness. It's proof they've stopped living under the weight of other people's expectations. They no longer want to be the eternal comforter. They want to be heard, to be seen, to be respected. And when their words are no longer filtered, it means they're reclaiming their voice, their right to own their story. 9. The empathy switch flips off. Super empaths are emotional sponges, absorbing all the joy, pain, and chaos of the world around them. Their ability to feel so deeply is so powerful, they sometimes lose track of where their emotions end and others begin. They put you first, always trying to make you happy, always trying to fix what you broke, even if it costs them their own peace. But when they hit their limit, that sponge gets wrung dry. They stop caring, not because they've turned cold, but because they finally realize they can't keep living just to please others. They ask themselves, I've given everything, who's giving to me? I've healed you, who's healing me? Think of Lisa, a super empath who spent her youth being the rock for her family and friends. She was always there when they needed her. But when she finally broke, no one showed up for her. One day, she said, I can't keep doing this. I need to take care of myself now. That wasn't selfishness. It was survival. She didn't abandon her compassion. She simply turned it inward for the first time in her life. That moment is a turning point. They don't become heartless. They become discerning. They stop being sponges for those who never appreciated them and begin saving their energy for those who truly deserve it, and most importantly, for themselves. This is the beginning of true healing, and it's something we should celebrate, not shame. 10. Sarcasm becomes their shield. Super empaths were once the sweetest souls, gentle, loving, overflowing with compassion. They were the ones you'd run to when life felt too cruel, the ones who'd find a way to make you laugh, even while they were quietly hurting inside. But when they reach their limit, when they're pushed beyond their breaking point by manipulation, blame, and emotional abuse, that sweetness transforms into something else. Sarcasm and bitterness. They pick up the shield of sarcasm and wield it like a weapon. They no longer respond with kindness, they respond with sharp, cutting remarks aimed directly at the bloated egos of those who tried to break them. Picture Emily, a super empath who had been gaslit by her roommate for months. One day, after being blamed yet again for something she didn't do, she smirked and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't perfect enough for your flawless little world. Maybe try looking in a mirror for once." The abuser is stunned, not because her words were cruel, but because they were true. The super empath doesn't use sarcasm to harm, they use it to defend, to deflate the egos that trampled their kindness. The bitterness isn't who they are. It's the armor they wear after being hurt too many times. But this isn't the end of their story. That shield doesn't make them cold, it makes them warriors. They are no longer passive victims, they are survivors, standing tall with a crooked smile and defiant eyes. And in that sarcasm they find a new kind of strength. The strength to say, I'm not afraid of you anymore. When a super empath hits rock bottom, they don't shatter, they rise. Their healing journey isn't a straight path. It's a whirlwind of struggle, awakening, and triumph. They don't just survive, they learn to live again, stronger, wiser, and more radiant than ever before. First, they learn to set boundaries, not to push others away, but to protect the fire within. Boundaries aren't cold walls, they're locked doors, opened only to those who truly value their presence. They used to believe that saying no was selfish, but now they understand it's the only way to stop their heart from being crushed under the weight of endless demands. Imagine them as a garden once trampled without mercy. When they reach their breaking point, they build a fence, not to isolate, but to protect what's left of their blooms. They water themselves, tend to wounds they once ignored, and slowly the garden begins to blossom again. That's the first lesson of recovery. You cannot save the world if you're slowly dying inside. It doesn't come easily. There are days when guilt creeps in, when they wonder if they're being too harsh. But every time they say no, every time they decline an unfair request, they feel a little lighter. They begin to see that boundaries aren't rejection, they're a declaration that their energy matters, their time matters, they matter. Next, they begin seeking those who are worthy of their compassion. They no longer stretch out their arms for those who only take and never give. They become selective, not because they've grown arrogant, but because they've learned their energy is finite and it must be given to souls who know how to give in return, who build with them, not break them. Think of Emily again, a super empath who spent her entire life trying to please everyone. When she hit her limit, she cut off toxic relationships, not with rage, but with the calm grace of someone who had finally found her worth. She found new friends, ones who didn't just take but also gave back. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in her emotional journey. She used to think she had to be there for everyone, even those who hurt her. But now, she knows compassion isn't a gift to be thrown carelessly. It's a sacred flame, meant to be shared with those who will help keep it burning. She builds a smaller circle, but a deeper one, where giving and receiving dance in harmony, not in imbalance. Most importantly, they learn to love themselves, something they had forgotten after decades of living for others. Loving yourself isn't vanity, it's finally recognizing that you too deserve the same compassion you've so freely given. They look in the mirror and say, "I've done enough, now it's time to heal." The road isn't easy. There are nights they lie awake wondering if they're abandoning someone. There are days when fear whispers that putting themselves first will make them lose the ones they love. But slowly, they realize those who truly love them won't walk away just because they've started loving themselves. They begin with small acts, choosing a quiet evening instead of chasing after others' needs, journaling to listen to their own emotions, or simply standing before a mirror and saying, "I am enough." Each small act becomes a brick in the foundation of their new self. A self that doesn't just give, but also receives. That doesn't just heal others, but heals from within. Healing is not a destination, it's a lifelong process. They learn to forgive themselves for giving too much, to accept that they cannot save everyone, and to believe that they are worthy of the happiness they brought into so many lives. They don't become someone else, they become a fuller version of who they were always meant to be. And if you are a super empath, hear this. You don't have to burn yourself out to prove your worth. You are a flame, but you have every right to choose how you burn, for whom, and for how long. And if you know a super empath, cherish them. Don't let your indifference be the reason they fade. They are a precious gift, but they are also human with limits and dreams that deserve to be nourished. Super empaths are the warm winds in a cold world, but they are not eternal. Today, we've walked through their journey, from radiant light to shadowy depths, and finally to a powerful rebirth. What about you? Have you ever reached your breaking point? And how did you rise from it? Share your story in the comments. I truly want to hear from you. If this video touched your heart, please give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and don't miss our next video, where we'll dive into how to protect your energy in a chaotic world. And above all, cherish the super empaths in your life before their flame burns out.